Good morning and a warm welcome from Pretoria. My name is Nadia Algera. I'm a Program Officer with the Academy of Science of South Africa. My portfolio is energy and environment, also take care of poverty and inequality. And I'm here just to welcome you all and to kickstart the program. I'd like to welcome you to our very first session of the Women in Leadership series. What we wanted from this series is to illuminate the lives of women in positions of leadership, how they got to these positions of leadership and the journey that they experienced. What was easy, what was not, what is still easy and what is still not easy. And it is our hope from this that the stories will inspire young and emerging women to set those goals, to aim high, and to drive for success and achievement after listening to the stories of these fabulous women. I would like to thank everybody who's come online to watch, and I do hope you enjoy the session. I'd also like to thank and welcome the ladies here in the room with us, Professor Stephanie Burton, Dr. Claudin Claccali, as well as Ms. Jodie Scott. Stephanie will introduce each lady in turn, and then we'll allow them an opportunity to let you know a little bit more about their lives. And then the three of them are going to have a very frank and honest discussion about their respective journeys. We will have the Q&A box going on at the bottom together with the chat. Please post as you see necessary. Our kind moderator and very capable woman in the lead position here will be watching the comments and will use those to inform the discussion. So please feel free to post. And if you want to direct any questions or comments directly at any one of these ladies, please do so. Do the little @ sign, @Mama Claudin or @Jodie or even @Stephanie. I'm sure Stephanie would be amenable to answering questions as well. So I do hope you will enjoy the session and we look forward to your feedback afterwards. I hand over now to Stephanie Burton, who's ready to take the program forward. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Good morning to everybody and welcome to our speakers. I add my welcome in my capacity as the Vice President of the Academy of Sciences of South Africa, and particularly as a woman. As Nadia said, this is our first session and we will be focusing on experiences and views of women who've been successful in positions of leadership. And we hope through these discussions that we will provide inspiration for those who are seeking to be successful in their aspirations as leaders. I think perhaps the most important part of this is to be addressing the views of women globally and together. So today we are going to hear from two women who have achieved success in quite different sectors and who are in leadership positions and who have made very significant contributions through their leadership roles. Perhaps I can introduce our discussion today by expressing a few ideas that we might take up later. And when we get to question time, perhaps our listeners might also want to comment. First of all, I think it's important to recognize this. Whatever field one works in, and whatever role one plays, we are those role players, and we are women. Not but, and we are women. My own career has been in research and academia, and I began my academic career much later than others, well after my children had gone to school. I have been a teacher, a researcher, a director of a postgraduate school, and eventually I served as a Deputy Vice Chancellor for research for 2 terms, and I'm now a professor in biochemistry and a professor at our Future Africa platform. My passion is all about research development, and capacity building. So here's what I want to say about that. In all those roles, I don't know about my colleagues, but I used to rage about the label of being a woman academic or a woman leader. But as I've interacted more and more with women from all sorts of different places, different fields, and many different ages, I realize that being a woman is relevant, and it is something to acknowledge and to embrace. So what about being a woman and a leader? Women's roles are varied. I think they're more varied than men have had to experience, and we do take some time sometimes to take time out for family and develop our careers later. I think we also tend to stay under the radar to some extent, particularly if we are combining roles of for example, being a working mother. Perhaps what needs to be said, and this is for everyone, being a successful leader, in my view, takes intelligence, vision, curiosity, the willingness to make a contribution, the ability to adapt and develop, willingness to share experience, and to enable others, and in due time, wisdom to give back. And all leaders engage in that pursuit of excellence, and they develop the ability to lead. It's often said that women are empathetic leaders. That's certainly something the world needs. And if we can bring to leadership both empathy and wisdom, as well as high expectations of excellence, then I think we can empower future women leaders. But what do we mean when we say we want to empower women? Do we mean power from within, which is essentially confidence? Do we mean power to be able to do, which essentially means being qualified and recognized? There are plenty of qualified women. Do we mean power to work with others, with the community, providing interaction, support? I think women are good at that. And the other kind of power that we might mean is the power to empower others, to enable others. And perhaps that is the most important aspect of leadership, and how we do that, including, for example, through mentoring, is possibly one of the most important things to consider. And maybe we will consider that later. So let me now turn to our two speakers. I'm going to ask each of them to speak for a few minutes about their route to leadership, their experience of success, and the challenges that they've encountered. They have been asked to speak about what was their foundation, what was their motivation, and what have been the obstacles and challenges that they've overcome, and what have been the key points in their lives. So I will ask them each to do that, and I'm first going to ask Jodie Scott, who is our first speaker. She works with the National Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. You will have been able to read her bio sketch in the information about this meeting, but she now works as the lead administrator for the South African Bureau of Standards. And that means setting strategy, managing day-to-day activities, and developing and executing a turnaround strategy. One of the interesting parts of her CV that I hope she'll mention is her role in the national signing of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe Gender Responsive Standards and Standard Development Initiative. And I hope we'll hear something about that. Jodie also holds South African and international higher education qualifications, including one from Harvard. Her qualifications are in trade policy and law, and she has an MBA as well. And she's the mother of 2 children. So Jodie, let us hear from you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Good morning to everyone. I think my journey is, it's taken a bit of a route, you know, and one of the things I think for me that is absolutely pivotal is having a strong foundation. And I think, you know, starting in the home with your family, very, very religious, deeply religious, very spiritual home that I come from. And I think that influences all of the decisions that I make and I execute. So for me, I think a strong foundation, I think that's helped. And I think also having a dad who is quite a liberal. So we didn't have, you know, these were girl roles and these were boys roles. My brothers would cook. In fact, one Sunday, one of my brothers was responsible for lunch, and he had gone out partying the night before, and so we got scrambled eggs on toast. Now this is, you know, I come from a very traditional family where it's roast potatoes and a piece of roast meat. And so accepting different roles in the home, I think, creates a platform for growth and development. One of the things I think about myself is that I'm always curious. I'd like to find out why things happen. You know, what makes things, why does the rand weaken? What affects that? Talking with trade relations, you know, what influences our trade policy stance? How can we improve that? So I think I've got an innate curiosity, and I think my journey had started, you know, gone to university, in financial services, and then somebody had called to ask if I was interested in a position in government. And at that point, I'd never thought about government as a career. And then I joined the DT. I thought, okay, you know, it required a move away from Cape Town, which was my home. I think that is also quite pivotal in your journey as a leader, is that you get to move out of your comfort zone. You know, I was watching one of these TED Talks, and they were talking about walking actively towards your discomfort. And so, you know, leaving a very close-knit family, coming up to Gauteng, we knew nobody. I think, you know, those kinds of experiences helped and shaped me. And my journey, I think, at the DTIC has been absolutely empowering and really incredible. I've had the privilege of working with some really fantastic male leaders. Sometimes I thought there was a fine line between empowerment and abdication. You know, they'd say to you, I'll just get on with the job and just do this. And then I think, gosh, you know, I'm not really skilled in that area, but I do know a few people who can help me. And I think those are some of the things that have worked for me, is that I have a broad network and a very diverse network, a range of people that I talk to about all kinds of things, you know, from, you know, my daughter's an autoimmune issue to understanding standards developments in developing economies as opposed to developed economies, a range of issues. So I think for me, those have been quite interesting. At the Bureau of Standards, I think one of my, you know, putting together financial turnaround hasn't been easy. You're dealing with a 76-year-old institution, which is quite steeped in tradition, in the way things are done, and you're actually needing to turn that on its head. So I think, some of the times I have felt as a woman leader that it's been a lonely road. And I don't know about your experiences, but for me, sometimes it's lonely, that I'm seized with a really tough matter. And who can I talk to? And so I don't know about, you know, people in the audience, but I have then developed, and I think through time, you know, a nice network of people who can guide and mentor me, acting as a sounding board. And I think that's helped unpack this journey that we've undertaken at SABS. I think one of the things, Stephanie, you mentioned was about the UNECE's signing. So this was on the sidelines of the International Standards Organization, their General Assembly, which was here in Cape Town in 2019. And they had asked for countries to come forward to talk about gender responsive standards. So these are standards that when you develop a national standards, which is what we do at the South African Bureau of Standards, it is done in a manner that is inclusive. And so it's not just about bringing women into the room. Often we think, you know, that's what gender parity is. It's just, you know, you can bring in 5 women and yeah, you've got gender equity. It's a lot more nuanced than that. Well, that's been my experience. It's about the processes. It's about the organizational culture that supports that. And I think I think I agree with you, Stephanie. I don't see myself as a woman leader. You know, I'm just Jodie, and I happen to be leading an institution right now. And I think, yeah, but I do think that being a woman comes with its own range of different experiences and different thinking that can help shape and redirect where institutions are going. So when we signed on to this, I think there were quite a few other countries. And what it requires of us is that we need to develop standards in a particular way that is inclusive. And so we started looking at our standards, and, you know, one of the chairperson of the South African Women in Plumbing said to me, you know, in the plumbing standards, you refer to a plumber as a he. And she said, you know, I'm a plumber and I'm a female, and so I'm a she. And so perhaps you need to look at your standards. And so, you know, how do we develop standards that reflect our society? And then we started having these discussions. And then it's not just about bringing women in. There's a lot more genders that we need to consider. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, is how do we, you know, create these inclusive practices, inclusive processes to develop standards that are responsive to gender, all kinds of gender, not just women. So I'll maybe leave it there. I haven't spoken to any of the kind of challenges that perhaps we can keep that for a bit later.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me introduce our other guest today, Mama Claudin Claccali. who is head of the International Cooperation and Partnerships sector of the Water Research Commission, which is perhaps one of our most proactive and progressive research councils in this country. Her portfolio also involves building and managing strategic partnerships and helping to facilitate South African researchers in the fields of global knowledge creation for water and sanitation and developing international agendas. And importantly, and I love this part, promoting South African innovations in international markets. So I'm not, again, going to read the whole CV because we have it, but I think it is important to know that she also serves as the adjudicator for the South African Technology Top 100 and the National Science and Technology Forum Awards. And over time, she has built this career not only at the Water Research Commission, but she also had worked for the Department of Science and Innovation. And before that, she practiced as a medical scientist and was lectured at the Medical University of Southern Africa. So a varied career. And let's listen to you for a few minutes, hearing how you got to this point.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephanie, and good morning to the participants. So as you have read my CV, I was privileged that I had experience or worked in different sectors within the science, technology, research, and innovation in South Africa. So I was once a student, a young researcher at an academic institution. I lectured, I went to national government department that looks at the overall national science, technology, and innovation. I then now currently am at the funding institution that funds research and innovation, but focusing on the water and sanitation sector. So I think my exposure and experience in those three sectors makes it easy for me to understand what is required, what the researchers are looking for, what they need, and what are the areas, the challenges that researchers are experiencing, so that when I do my work, which is going out there and seeking funding, seeking whatever kind of partnerships that I'm looking for that will then benefit the South African researchers, I know really what I'm talking about. So I really like to also encourage the participant out there that, you know, you can be a woman in leadership, but having some technical background also helps, and it will really enable you to do what you need to do. And maybe just like Jodie, my foundation, it's my parents, both of them, my mom and dad, are leaders in the communities. They were leaders in the church. They are leaders in the working environment. They are now pensioners, of course. And also in their pension years, they're still serving in different committees where they are leading the community. So I've grown up seeing leadership, experiencing what leadership is, the challenges, the stress, everything that it brings to a person. And I just liked it because I'm a person that is challenged by new things, having to think about new ways of doing things that are outside my box. I get bored when I do things and I don't even have to think about them when I do them. So when I saw my parents sometimes struggling, sometimes having these big wins and we all celebrate, I'm like, I'm going to do that for a living. And again, what drives me is I want to see young people and women contributing to the development of this country in whatever way. So where I am right now, it's through research and innovation. So whether it's getting opportunities for young people, for young researchers to be actively involved in research and not just to be a number within that we count as the WRC. For example, in the WRC, when we fund research, we require specific, they must include women, they must be students and so forth. But for us, it's not about only the numbers. It's a meaningful contribution that they have in the research projects. Again, if they are not in research, they can come in where we do projects, for example, in the communities. Maybe a vulnerable rural community doesn't have access to water and sanitation, for example. The WRC will work with partners to bring those infrastructure, the resources. We work with the communities there. Also at the community level, even if you're not a researcher, you can be able to then work with us, get some skills and contribute to bringing this solution that is very key to your community. So, and of course, also those women that aspire to be leaders like us. I'm doing a lot of mentoring of young women and so forth. So it's really looking at different areas where women could play a meaningful role and contribute to the development of this country. And then maybe just a little bit on the my journey from moving to academia to government. I remember when I told my professor at the university that, okay, I saw this position at what is called the Department of Science and Technology then. and I want to take it. I don't know if he wanted to keep me for the institution or not, but he was like totally discouraged. You can't go there. You're such a brilliant researcher. You're gonna get, you're gonna die there. Government doesn't work, blah, 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 all the negative things. I'm like still, and then his last words were, in any case, you wouldn't get in at that level when you're coming from academia. I'm like, okay, let's see. I applied, I got the job. Obviously, they were not happy to see me leave. And I liked it in government because what I wanted then was I did research, I managed even honors students and so forth, but I had this hunger to want to know, like, why are things stuck at government when researchers need things? There's good policies. We hear them talking about this thing, but somehow there's a disconnect between implementing those policies and us benefiting as researchers. Then I said, maybe let me jump ships and go to the government side and see what is happening there and try to influence the change in government. And that is why I really moved to government. And of course, after 12 years with the Department of Science and Innovation, I felt I needed a change. And of course, because also the love for the water issues, for the sanitation issues, looking at the fact that the SDG requires us to have access to water and sanitation, all the citizens, but in South Africa, we're still struggling, also the rest of the African continent. So I thought, let me go to the sector where there's still a lot of leadership required, a lot of help that I could contribute to make sure that South Africa at least comes close to achieving SDG 6, which is access to clean water and dignified sanitation for its people. And lastly, my passion for Africa is this: I love our continent. I'm a really proud African. And the challenges that we are experiencing, really, some of them I feel like they can be resolved, but we just talk, we complain, and people don't do anything about it. So the little bit that I'm contributing, from starting with making sure that people have access to water and sanitation, I think it's a bit, and it works. And through our partnership with the WRC, there's a lot of partnership that we've developed with Africans. We do training programs, capacity building, where we develop trainings with international partners or local, and we open it up for the whole African young researchers. So that bit that I'm doing, I believe that I'm contributing to transforming the sector, empowering the young people in the water sector in Africa as a whole. And it really gives me pleasure. Every day when I wake up with this energy, just wanting to do more and more and more. Thank you.
Mama Claudin has mentioned something that I wasn't going to start with, but let me bring it in because I think it's something very important. And it connects with that being in Africa, part of what we do. And the role of women in Africa is a little different, or perhaps it's a traditional, cultural African way, but women have a very important role in whatever their community is, in all communities in Africa. So to what extent does a network of women in Africa play a part in how you function? I don't know if you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, so for us,
Jodie?
for the Water Research Commission, we do belong to different platforms and networks. The one specific one maybe I should mention is the African Women in WASH sector, WASH standing for Water, Sanitation and Hygiene. So as the institution, myself and other ladies in the WRC will sit in platforms for women empowerment and so forth, because through those platforms, we are then able to even contribute beyond our borders of South Africa. And we also had a Women in Water program that was the Department of Water and Sanitation program, which we implemented as the WRC. It came to an end, the phase 1, but obviously we'll have a phase 2, hopefully. We have a partnership with Women in Construction and Built Environment in South Africa, for example. So, and the WISA Women in Water also. So we sit in many platforms because we believe as a network, you have a bigger voice, obviously. And what we're trying to do from the WRC side with our women agenda is, we, as I've said, don't want to just tick the boxes. We don't want women to only contribute at the research level, because currently, if you check, the women are mostly in the laboratories, in the research. But if you move to where the impact is, where we're talking about innovation and impact, developing technological and innovative solutions that will change the lives of the people down there, you don't find a lot of women there. So what we're doing in the WRC is we're really also trying to say, what can we put as enablers to really support the women in this country and the other African countries to contribute to the innovation part of things, bringing new solutions, tools that could then change the environment that we are in. So that is how we currently contributing to the Women Agenda as the Water Researcher Commission and myself globally and also within the local platforms. And of course, lastly, maybe to mention that as women, I think we are actually having a competitive advantage. We are good with listening. We are good with communication. We are compassionate. We are loving. We are caring. Most of us, we are there. So already we have those things that are really good qualities of a leader. So we really need to just embrace that and bring them and stop wanting to be like men. Because the minute we want to be in boardrooms and be like them, we don't bring this value that a woman can bring in whatever setup you are in. So let's embrace who we are and bring this important element to the cycle of men, what normally people called boys clubs. Bring the spark of what only a woman can bring. And in the home, for example, women are also managers and leaders. We manage our home and so forth. Most of the challenges experienced by communities, women knows more about them. So bringing them on board when you're looking for solution, you're only helping because the solutions will really be relevant.
Thank you. Jodie, would you like to comment about the importance of networks?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. For me, it's absolutely critical. I don't think I'd survive a day if I didn't have a network. You know, anything from well, so what we do from a formal point, I think, and it's important to recognize there are formal networks and informal networks. And in my experience, a lot of the things happen informally rather than through a formal structure. And so I think that also just resonates with me as a person. I'm not quite so, you know, rigid and so I'm fairly fluid, I think, in my approach and my personality, I'd like to think. So we're one of the members of ASSAf, which is the African Standardization Organization. And they are so there are technical committees, which we participate in. And I was just saying to one of the colleagues last week, because at the Bureau, we had a Women's Day event, and we brought in 2 filmmakers, Black filmmakers, to showcase their films. And we also brought in somebody, a space engineer, and she makes satellites and components of satellites and exports them. I was saying we need to drive this under the ASSAf umbrella, because I don't think and I don't think it's as defined as you know, as your institution, the WRC, in terms of the formal networks that you have, and establishing programs targeted and aimed at and for women. So I think there's some work we need to do in that space. But I think, you know, SABS has also signed on to ASSA's, the Mutual Recognition Agreement Framework. So effectively what it is that if you're wanting, as an export, if you're wanting to export into DRC, into Kenya, Namibia, and you've got the SABS mark, and we have that recognition agreements with that partner country, the compliance burden is less. So they would accept the SABS mark as one of their marks. So we're driving that quite aggressively on the continent. But I do think that there's space in our sector to bring in a lot more women. And so those are some of the initiatives that I think that are in the pipeline. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but there's work in progress. And so I think it's an exciting program.
So you've both mentioned there interventions and structures that are enabling others to become part of your fields. And I similarly have had that same experience. I think one of the things that's really important for anybody who chooses to go a route of, as you say, doing something which is new and which is quite brave, and which might be unusual, does require a kind of confidence. And I think it also perhaps requires, or it is helped if we have our own kind of more informal networks, and particularly women who can lead by example. I want to tell you a little story about my own experience of moving into something new long ago, when I was actually funded by the Water Research Commission. I was doing some work on water, which involved the South African wine industry. And I was asked by one of the senior managers, administrators in the wine industry. And the question was this: what's a nice girl like you doing in science?
Oh, no.
Like,
I'm not often speechless. But I think it illustrates, it was a while ago, it was a long time ago, but I think it illustrates that thing about it's sometimes difficult to be a woman moving into a field where women are not necessarily the majority, or in fact are often the minority. And that response of being the woman in the room, or one of the women who's been put into the room, and then needing to justify or to explain yourself because you're a woman. That's one of the things that I get quite outraged about. But nevertheless, have you had those kind of experiences? How have you dealt with those?
Yes, I have. And for me, I think it's I'm a bit more of a generalist. I think if I just look at the two of you and your impressive CVs, and so I get that I'm not technical enough, and that rankles, because I think in certain positions you need to be a leader, and a manager, and for me those are what's required, I think. Now, I think at other levels, the technical, and don't get me wrong, it's critically important. And I think you made that point, having that technical background assists. So yeah, I do get outraged, but then I think, you know what, Jodie, this is not about you. I'm very clear. I think, I became a mom quite late in life. And so I went through a bit of soul searching about what are the issues that I want to, or the values I want to bring forward and what I don't want to. And so for me, it's none of my business what you're thinking about me right now. It's more important what I think about myself and the value and contribution that I can bring. And I think it talks to that confidence that you have. And I think if I had to talk to my younger self or to some younger person out there, don't doubt yourself. And I think, I don't know about you, but I have lots of conversations happening in my head.
Oh, yes.
There's like this constant narrative, you should be doing this, come on, you need to do this. And some of those things are seeped, I think, in what your story that you mentioned, in patriarchy. And it comes across as being very caring. So, I'm doing this for your best interest. I remember very early in my career, and I worked at a very large financial institution, and they gave me a year's a program, to get now up to speed. I completed that in like 3 months. And then the divisional head said to me, but it's impossible. Nobody's done that before. So I said, well, you have a fairly rigorous program. I've met all of the requirements. And so, yeah, it's done. He was like, no, but you still have lots to learn. And so I said, yes, I'm willing and able and ready to learn those things. So, let's start sharing them. And I think for me, bringing in a bit of humor has always worked for me. One of the things I think in my MBA is that Morris Tubeni taught us, it's hold your opinions lightly. And so I kind of rely on that, I'm holding my opinions lightly, but I'm also there to learn and to have fun and to bring a bit of me into the equation. So that's how I've kind of dealt with it. Thank you, Stephanie.
What have you felt that you met along the way?
Yeah, just maybe to just acknowledge Jodie there for not taking what people are saying or thinking about you as the reality. That is what breaks a lot of people. And you may find in 90% of the cases, it's not even correct what those people are saying. So it's very important to have self-confidence, believe in yourself, because you are your biggest fan and your biggest supporter to start with. So when it comes to the reception of being a woman within, and especially in my area where it's international partnerships, I'm surrounded by oldish kind of male people. It's many cases where I found myself as a young woman and Black person in the entire room when I travel overseas, for example, for our partnership engagements. And maybe if I start with when I was in academia researcher, people used to say to me, even now, actually, they're saying I'm in the wrong career. you're not supposed to be in research. You're supposed to be somewhere in the arts, you know, doing things like that. I'm like, no, I am a researcher. So I've always been told that they think I've chosen the wrong career, and I've proven it wrong because I'm doing very well now in the same career that I've chosen. But maybe one example of something that happened to me as a woman when I started working with males, I normally arrive early in meetings. So I arrived early in this meeting, set my laptop up and everything. Unfortunately, I was the only Black and woman in that meeting. The gentleman walks in, a Black African man. He walks in, greets all the gentlemen with a handshake, oh, laughing and all that. And he gets to me, say hello. Then he puts his laptop next to me. Okay. He's struggling to connect or something. I see there's a challenge. I'm like, are you okay? I don't know why these people, I mean, this thing is not connected. I'm like, can I help you? I helped him to connect. It's like, okay, he didn't even say thank you. When I stood up to go make tea for myself, I was like, can you bring me a cup of tea, please? I brought a cup of tea with a smile to him. When the program starts and I get introduced, his mom was like, oh, you are Mama Claudia? I'm like, yes. Oh, okay. Like he felt very embarrassed and all that, and I didn't entertain it. So what I'm trying to show there, sometimes you get this negative reception. Don't be harsh and want to prove yourself and, you know, defend yourself and all that. Just calm. The gentleman after the meeting had to be coming to me and apologize. You know, I actually thought you're one of the support staff, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay. But so what it taught me, that lesson was I could have just flipped and like, I mean, really make you tea, me. But I brought the tea and I didn't even introduce myself, say anything until after the meeting he saw who I am, then he changed his attitude. So there's a cultural problem that we're having in the world, not only Africa. I think it links to how we raised at our homes and also the institutional cultures. Because in some institutions, this thing is still there. Getting a woman leader, you get there and everybody's like, wow, it's a woman. Like, and then what? What did you expect? So it's not only socially, even in working environment, there's that culture where people still believe good leaders are only males and so forth. So I have experienced it, but I've always tried to keep calm and react nicely to the people. And now I'm friends with most of them actually that treated me that way. But yeah, it still exists, but better than the generation before us. And hopefully it will be even the best for the generations to come.
Absolutely. I think that hearing yourselves, there's been a huge change. Possibly some of it has been very purposeful. And when we look at how we talk about our institutions being diverse, I think we're learning that it means exactly what you've both mentioned, and that is that you're a woman, whatever your gender, you are not necessarily a man. And the fact that we can then acknowledge our roles and the fact that we are good at our roles, that thing of being and a woman and not in spite of being a woman. I think that's wonderful. I think that I go back to that feeling that I tried to express earlier of the fact that women are empathetic. Women actually understand this. And perhaps we bring a lot to a discussion because of that. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of the questions that have been coming up on the screen. The first one was, how far have we come from the traditional woman in the kitchen kind of society? It makes me smile because I don't spend a lot of time in the kitchen anymore. I used to, but work takes time, and so the household is a little different these days. But would you like to comment on that?
Maybe I should.
In general, how far have we come?
I think we've made some progress, and I think WIF in July released the Global Gender Gap Report, and it talks about sub-Saharan Africa. We'll reach gender parity. It will take us 98 years to reach gender parity in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, I don't know about you, but I'll be pushing up daisies by then. So I think, we have made progress. I don't think the progress for me has been fast enough. I think there are still some stereotypes that women have about each other, that we have about each other. So I'm married to a fairly atypical guy. he's a chef by trade. So I also very rarely get into the kitchen. In fact, my family's coming up. We're doing a family celebration this weekend. So my husband's been in charge of the meal preparation. Everybody, you know, I'll be in charge of the music and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, so I think, for me, I think it's, you define the choices that you want well, the spaces in which you want to play in, and you make then choices based on that. And those choices have to be aligned with who you are. I still enjoy cooking. And for me, it's part of a labor of love that I do for my family and friends. And I love having people over. I don't get as much time to do that these days. But yeah, so I think gender parity, we've made some progress. I think we need to move a lot faster, because 98 years, I mean, you know, I'm trying to tell that to my 16-year-old daughter. I mean, goodness.
I think the examples that we set for our children are absolutely critical. One of the most dominant notices I keep on my fridge is the one that says this is an equal opportunities household. And everybody is welcome to contribute.
Good.
But I think it is an important way of looking at things, that we have moved in all spheres of our lives to that more kind of even sort of society. So here's another question. There are several, and they're all very good questions. The first is, what does success mean to you, and how would you define success for yourself at this stage going forward? Mama Claudine?
Yeah, for me, success is being able to effectively and efficiently achieving what I plan or intend to achieve as Mama Claudine and the people that I work with. Success will be for me, because as I've said, I've got a passion to empower people. Success will be myself seeing the people that I've empowered, empowering others and doing big things in the societies. So for me, success is not just me position-wise elsewhere, but it's also seeing the kind of the young people that I've groomed doing something else, because the bigger thing here is empowerment of everybody in the communities, development of our economy. So success will be really seeing a lot of women, young people contributing to building this economy of this beautiful country of ours.
And for yourself?
I think quite similar to what was just said. It's and you know, for me, success is a moving target. It's me, I think, first of all, being true to myself and my values. And so for me, you know, being honest and being present, acting with integrity, so, you know, as a person. But then I think it's also empowering others. And it's not about me. It's, you know, it's about the context in which we live. If I could have one person who feels that there's an opportunity for them in whatever fields it is, you know. It's also about sharing information, creating awareness about the things that we do, the things that South Africa has. So yeah, I have a very different view of success, you know. It's, yeah, and it's a moving target. It's whatever is important to me at this stage in my life.
Yes, I agree. The success, your view of success changes enormously as you go through a career, right? Started out at some point with qualifications. You have an MBA, you have a PhD, I have a PhD, and I remember that part as being like a big success. But of course, as you go through different stages, you come to different points. And eventually, I think your view of success actually a legacy. You know, how will the others who follow you have succeeded because of that? So here's another question about success and leadership, and I like this one. I'm interested in your answer. Leadership capability.
Definitely.
Daily.
I mean, you have to doubt yourself, because, you know, we work with people, we work with moving targets, we work with sometimes enabling support and stuff like that. So for me, yeah, I mean, I've daily, you're very right, because sometimes you even, you know, you're leading people, especially with the people side of things. For me, you lead a specific team of people, and you feel like they are not being able to succeed or implement things effectively is because you're not maybe it's because I'm not providing the correct leadership and direction and, you know, strategic, all those kind of things. And I really doubt myself many times, saying, maybe it's me, it's not them. But for me, what has worked though is the minute I start doubting myself, I have a lot of sounding boards with many people around me, women and men. So I will just go to them and paint this scenario. No, there's this demand. Is it me, or what do you think? And even more importantly, talk to the people or that are involved in that situation that I may be doubting myself in, just to get their views, because that are not really true, and you die in them, and it's actually not the truth. So talking to people, but it does happen as a human being. You will now and then
daily, as you say. And you wonder about individuals' decisions and individual actions as much. I have always thought that having what I call a brains trust has been enormously helpful. A small number of people who have followed my career over a long time and who are still
young space engineer leading in her field internationally, not just in South Africa. And so, yeah, you know, I think, no.
But maybe just to add, Stephanie, that it's to enter, I don't think we all were the same way, as I've said. So it's really up to you to really show up and show that you're worth whatever sector you're going into. But I think with some sectors, there is an issue of their working hours that may not be suitable for women, and which is why I think employers should be able to be a little bit flexible with regards to working hours, have flexi hours. I'm not saying women must work less hours. You can work part in the office, go sort yourself. Like for myself, I don't believe in subcontracting raising my kids. So I take them to school every day, I pick them up, I take them to extramural, I cook every day because I love cooking. You know, I do a lot of things for my family. So if I were to stick to specific hours, it may not work. As a leader, we know that sometimes you have to finish at 7. Now and then, yes, I'll make arrangements, but we need some sort of flexibility in working environments to make sure that women are able to contribute and can still contribute like men, even though we have other activities that we're doing on the side. Because, yeah.
Let me share a very funny story. So I had my second son 6 weeks before I turned 40. I, you know, my son was a little baby and I needed to go back to work. And I was a lactating working mom, and I needed to sort Eli's lunch out for the next day. And I had to fly to Durban. I had to take the 6 o'clock flight to Durban. The minister was there and we were looking at the sugar mill industry. And I needed to urgently attend to Eli's lunch. You know, those of you who are moms will understand that when you need to express, you need to express. And there was nowhere else except the minister's holding room. And luckily, he was delayed at the airport. I say to the DTIC's chief economist, and to this day, he still blushes. I say, you got to guard the door. He says, well, I said, I need to do something in the room. He says, but the minister's coming now. I said, well, he's just going to have to wait a bit because I need to, he said, but what are you going to do? I said, I need to sort out Eli's lunch for tomorrow. And took a couple of months, and then he says, oh, ooh, you know, like, why did you have to tell me that? I said, well, just guard the door, please. And the minister comes and he's, I can hear him making these excuses. Jodie's in the room, and the minister says, oh, good shot, I need to chat to her. And a couple of minutes later, I was busy sorting out Eli's lunch, and I opened the door and the minister said, oh, hello. I said, yeah, well, you know, thank you very much, Minister. I was just attending to Eli's lunch, and we can start the day now.
One does get into situations where there is nothing that you can do except fulfill one particular role at one time. So there's a question here about what messages on gender issues do we relate to our children and our family members. Says there the girl child. I can start by saying the answer is the same one that my father particularly gave me, and that is, you can do anything if that's what you want to do. And I think that's a critical message that goes through all of our family. I don't know that anybody would say anything other than perhaps what what are the challenges that you might meet if you do decide as a woman or as a girl that you are going to do something which is perhaps considered to be a little out of the ordinary? What would we be telling our children about that?
Find some friends in that space. Find the mom or the dad who works in that space, who can mentor and guide you. Yeah, I think similar to you. For me, there's, and so my dad, and this was me in maths. And I said one day to Matt, I'm not good at maths. It's because I'm a girl. And my dad had a fit. I got a tutor. Well, I got several tutors. So, after school, on a Saturday, on a Sunday evening. And he was saying he wasn't allowed to do maths at school because of the political history at the time. And so nobody was going to tell his children, let alone they themselves say they're not going to do something. So I think having that kind of, positive affirmation in your home. For me, I think it's just encouraging kids to explore a range of activities, avenues, and for you to guide them, in terms of what their interests are. So
maybe if I can also add, I've got two boys also, two teenage boys, and they have this thing. Sometimes they'll be going out with their dad and they'll be like, no, this is a boys thing, mama. They've got a boys thing, a girl thing. So it starts there really. And I really try my best to show them it has nothing to do with gender, going to do this, going to do that, and I agree with what both of you have said. But in addition to that, what I always or normally tell young girls and women is that I'm a Christian. God will never make a mistake of making you a woman. So never doubt yourself and want to change yourself to be a man or be. That's why I'm saying don't try to be like men in boardrooms and them. So God didn't make a mistake. Just go out there and shine.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. So let's go back to a question that we kind of started with, and that is, what have you been able to do to pave the way or make it possible for other women around you or people who are perhaps not yet in the positions of leadership that you are in? What are the actions that you've taken to empower those people and those women and to make it possible for them to progress?
So some of the things I've done at SABS and at the DTIC is look at the work environment. Because, I think having a woman as a leader doesn't make the environment conducive to women. So on kind of the performance of the institution, it's setting targets. So we've set targets for the number of women that we want in our technical committees as a, organizational goal. And I think targets in of themselves is not going to solve the problem, but it helps because you then have critical mass. And I think I have a figure of 30% in my head, that when you have about 30% women, it helps change the dynamic in a boardroom, in a particular forum. So I think from an institutional point of view, there are those targets. But then I think in terms of the environment, so we've had to relook at some of our policies, our study policies, our working from home arrangements, because we've had to say to everybody, you now have to come back to work. But we have this flexible working arrangement, and I think it's to the point that you've made. I think one of the things that, for me, COVID has taught us is that there's a lot more to life. And it's how do you bring the whole person into the workspace? And sometimes bringing that whole person into the workspace is on a Teams platform because, somebody feels a lot more comfortable. I think it's, people who have mental health challenges, they're finding it a lot harder to cope. So also making sure that you've got a wellness program and that you actively talk about it. And I'm sure, as many of you, we've had deaths in our family. And that one day I had back-to-back meetings and I thought I could do it. And then I just packed up crying I just burst into tears in the one meeting. And, as a professional woman, it's not quite how you want people to engage with you. And then I said, actually, you know what? I have to say, I've just lost a very dear cousin this morning. I'm unable to continue. So I think I just need some time to cry and regroup and come back. And I think, having those kinds of conversations, being honest and authentic, helps shift the conversation, because now people say, oh my goodness, you're also coping with this. And that opens up this space. And then I think we've also done some specific things around women in leadership. We've partnered with UCT's Graduate School of Business to design a Women in Leadership program for the women in leadership. Because when we were recruiting for senior posts in the organization, there weren't many women coming forward. And I was, where are the women? And why aren't people coming? I haven't quite answered for myself and to my satisfaction why women aren't coming forward. I think there's a part skills gap, but I think there are also other issues. And so I think, I'm curious to find out why we're not doing this. And I think staying that course, asking those questions, where are the women? Why aren't more women coming? What do we need to do to change the dynamic? Has been critical. So I think those are some of the things that we've embarked on.
Maybe from the Water Research Commission side, I would say that we have mentorship programs like many government and government entities. And if you check, you'll see that most of our interns are actually young graduates. We have, as I've mentioned, several networks where we're trying to build opportunities and develop and transform the sector. And also in the WRC itself, obviously, like in other institutions, we have gender targets with regards to our employment status quo. And I think we're doing well in that area. But for me personally I've mentioned that women, we talk a lot, we like sharing and all that. I use every opportunity that I get to make a change or contribute in somebody's life. So for example, somebody could come to me complaining about, oh, we're now back in the office full time. We now had to be going back to the office full time. It was good with COVID. I try to make them move out of that reactive, frustrative, complaining mode to creating and showing them the benefits of being here in the office actually, because sometimes we fall into this complaining mode that we don't even think about how can we create the work environment that you want, the life that you want, the relationships that you want. And it all starts in the mind and in the conversations and the power of the words, that we're saying. So I use every opportunity of when I engage with people, when I see that there's something that needs to be mindset, maybe change, I'll talk to them and try to guide them. And that's how I believe also empowers the young people and the women to become better people.
I'm going to take these questions in a slightly different order from what they are. There's a question about mentoring. Are we open to mentoring young girls? And do you feel girls in rural areas do not access opportunities as easily as those in urban areas? I'll ask you that question now, but I want to say about mentoring. Mentoring is something I feel very strongly about. And at the moment, I'm engaged with setting up a national mentoring system for academic, early career academics. But the point about that is that mentoring means different things and provides for different needs. So the kind of mentoring that we might be saying for girls in rural areas or urban areas might mean that it's not us necessarily, the three of us, who might be open to that mentoring, but that we might be able to set up some sort of programs and to understand that mentors need to be close at hand. Most of the time they need to be close by and understand the situation. I don't know what you would think about mentoring generally, or mentoring for girls in rural areas.
Absolutely. I think for me it's a relationship, and one that must be valued by both the mentor and the person being mentored. And I think once you understand that dynamic, I think it shifts to me learning from you and you also learning from me. I do think that girls in rural area have a tougher time in terms of accessing information, data, all of those getting in touch. So, that's one of the things that's been bothering me about standards, and particularly standards development. I think it's elitist. And my son mentioned this to me. We'd gone, taken somebody home, and there was a chizanyama and he wanted something to eat. I said, okay, fine, let's have something to eat. And then he made a comment. He says, Mom, I don't see the SABS mark anywhere. And then I thought, absolutely. So I haven't answered that question yet. We seized with it as an institution. How do we get an institution like the Bureau into the informal economy and into rural areas. So government, there's some things around the district development model, and I've spoken to Melusi, and I'm going to use this opportunity to say I'm wanting to partner with ASSAf on your mentoring program. Good. Because we want to access some mentors for women at ASSAf. So I think it's absolutely critical. We had, so one of my MBA colleagues, she runs a very big engineering consulting firm, and she's brought a concept called group mentoring. We all have time constraints. There's only 24 hours in a day, and I don't know about you, but sometimes on a Friday evening, my to-do list is a mile long. And so I thought, I think this is a nice concept. And so maybe for rural girls, I think something like group mentoring could be relevant and applicable in a context where, not all of them would have access to data and cell phones and all of that. And if you maybe can group some of these girls, for me, it makes sense. I absolutely agree with that.
And maybe just to add one element, that there are lots of NGOs and youth programs, even in rural areas. So I think one could join those groups because they're already set up. It's already existing structures. They're having how they know how to gather the kids and so forth. So you can join those kind of groups. We can create our own and so forth. But it is important that a mentor is closer to the people. But I think also, even though they may be in rural areas, nowadays, most of the young people have connection to access to internet. We see them everywhere in social media. So maybe looking at how we can change the way of doing things, like COVID has taught us that you can actually function in a virtual world.
If they can make a TikTok.
Exactly. Establish a lot of even a TikTok live mentoring session, you can do that, so there's possibilities, and we do of course need to reach out to also the people in the rural areas.
And I think we must remember that mentoring means different things and at different levels. There's many variations. Let's move away from that for a moment to an interesting question, which I to some extent can identify with. Somebody relating that she has experienced being told she's too intimidating when communicating verbally. She's confident, but perhaps too confident. How would you respond to such a comment? Too confident? Too intimidating?
Would you say that to a guy, Stephanie? That he's too confident and too intimidating?
That's the point, isn't it?
No, but to have a conversation, I've experienced that actually, and actually I'm experiencing it all the time, where people, especially the young ones, like our interns, the young researchers, when I'm with them in a room and I start talking, people close up, they can't talk. Like any input from you, they go zoop. Then I ask them why. No, you're intimidating. You just know a lot and we feel like we know less. So for me, when I get that kind of a thing, I engage with the person bilaterally to kind of get where is it coming from? Because most of the time it's actually not about you being intimidated. It's about them not being confident and believing that they have what it takes. And then it brings the coach, Claudin, in place. By the way, I'm finalizing my coaching. Life coaching. I should be certified by next month. So it brings the coach Claudin in place to say, communication is key. Talk to the person, get to know why they are thinking you're intimidated. It may be them, and in that way, then you help them. Rather than just saying, okay, I'm intimidating, sort yourself out, or not respond at all, because there's always a root of this kind of things where they're coming from.
For me, it's also having a bag of tricks.
Yes.
And I don't know what else to call it, but sometimes there are different ways. They say you can get the same amount of bees with sugar and honey. No, with vinegar and honey. Apologies. And so to your question, I would ask a trusted friend, could I have said that differently? Because what I find is when we're in leadership positions, it's about influencing and about so you're selling an idea. And how do you get as many people to buy into that idea? So for me, it's selling a financial turnaround. It's making sure everybody understands the context in which we find ourselves. So I would say, ask a trusted friend if you could do things differently, how you can better influence. And sometimes it's in an approach, but, I wouldn't say you're too intimidating. No, please don't doubt, don't second guess yourself, don't doubt yourself like that. But if there are different ways of exploring and getting the message across, I'd say let's chat about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that things like perhaps sometimes feeling a little impatient or a little frustrated. That's not about being a woman, that's about being human and trying to get a job done. Let's move on to one other question, and this is one about how you move from being a manager to being a leader, or how you balance that. That's an interesting question, and my immediate response to it is that you grow into leadership. But I don't know, what do you think about how you move towards leadership?
I think you can be a leader wherever you are. And that's what I tell my kids, you know. So if my daughter's on the hockey field, she can lead. She doesn't have to be the captain of a hockey team, but she can lead in a particular area. And so for me, it's about a particular set of attributes. It's about a particular way of engaging, a particular skill set. So I would say, think about areas in your workspace where you can take the lead in that. You can either find out who else in the country is doing that kind of work. You can speak to some academics, and you can then look at thinking about your work context and what changes you can make to be more effective, efficient, change the dial. And yeah, so it would be about creating then a network, a pool around yourself of people that you can think about things differently. And for me, that's about being a leader, is how do you think about things differently and have a different outcome and then a greater impact. And so I would say, you know, we're all technical experts in various areas, but so find the one thing that you are curious about and create a system around that.
And yeah, and for me also, leadership is really about being concerned with the success of the whole. Yes. Not little tasks and activities that a manager would do. And you tick, you've done this and that. So, which is why not everybody can be a leader. Actually, you need to have a specific qualities to be able to do that. But it's really about not really focusing on the targets, the tick boxes, and them, but looking at the broader way of doing things. That's how you easily move from being a manager into a leader.
Quite the same. It's about the impact and what you eventually achieve. We are getting towards the end of our conversation, so
time flies. Gosh.
Would you like to consider one other topic or aspect of your own successful leadership that we haven't touched on that you might like to just highlight, Mama Claudin?
Maybe something that was also in the questions, what broke or made me as a woman leader. You know, when I did my PhD, I had young boys. I'm a married woman. I had just gotten a promotion at work. So I think I took too much. I thought I couldn't chew. But what that overwhelming situation made me to be is a person that can actually thrive under pressure. It made me improve my time management. It reminded me that if you commit and you dedicate yourself to whatever you're committing to and remain your integrity in check, you will be able to achieve it. As an overwhelming thing that I've taken up, and I performed in my new position. I hope I was a good wife. I'm a good mother, and I got my PhD out of the whole situation. So that was a very hectic. And most of the people actually did say to me, maybe you must stop with a PhD, get used to the new position, and then you'll register after. But I just said, no, I'm going to do it, and I will do it. And I was able to make it. So sometimes don't doubt yourself, but it is important that when you commit, you really commit and you dedicate everything that you have in you to achieve what you've committed to, not in order not to fail. But it is possible that you can do multiple things as a woman and still achieve them.
So two things for me. One, I think, is the guilt moms have about working moms. And I have a mother who constantly tells me that's misplaced. So I think having that kind of sounding board, because, you know, the noises in our head and the kind of stories, the narratives we tell ourselves is critically important. And so making sure that you've got your brain's trust around you, I think, Stephanie, is what you called it, and I really like that. And then for me, it's a concept called reframing. You know, I had to do my MBA thesis over the Christmas period. And in South Africa, the entire country parties except me, because I had to go through like 50 articles a week, and there was a hectic timeline that you have to, get through. And so thinking about your context, your situation slightly differently for me was valuable. It was time, it was me time. It didn't feel like a day at the spa with my buddy, with my bestie, but it was time I'm investing in me for my growth and my development. And I think I also see my growth and development, not just for me, but as part of a community, as part of a family, as part of a broader society. So I think, having those kind of short, looking short term, but also your eye on a kind of longer term trajectory is good. So
there are many aspects of a career which becomes a leadership career, and perhaps one of the most important parts of that is being able to look back and identify the milestones and the makes and breaks that you've had, and then think, as you look back on it, or as you mention it to anybody else, that they acknowledge things that happened under your leadership, not necessarily because you were in the forefront of it, but because you made it happen. Okay, there's one last comment that I'm going to just read from National Science Week, where a learner said, "I would like to be a leader even though I'm a female." And other learners nodded in agreement. How do you get learners to see being female as an advantage and not a disadvantage, and that being female should not limit them? Well, I think it goes right back to that thing of saying you can be a leader and a woman.
Exactly.
In fact, I think it's an advantage to be a woman in many cases. Would you like to leave a last thought?
I'd like to tie that with one of the other questions about specific initiatives being implemented at school. And I think for me that's quite critical. Gender sensitivity is critically important. In many of the communities we have, to have both parents in the home, both, I think you were saying, solid role models is the exception rather than the norm, unfortunately. You have child-headed households. And so where else are these kids going to access information? But at school, you look in particular communities. I mean, I think I was trying to recall the stats of the number of children that have been orphaned as a result of COVID. And so where are they going to learn about how dad should treat mom or mom should treat dad in a non-judgmental, safer space than the communities in which they are coming from? I mean, one of the others was about gender-based violence. I mean, this is a scourge that we're faced with. And so it talks about, how do you raise boys? What goes on in their heads? How appreciative are they of different genders, not just females? How do you raise girls to be creating spaces for everyone? Because we need men and women. And we need, each other. We need diversity and inclusivity. And so how do you create that? And so I think there has to be something done at the school level in order to do that. And I think if I think it's also then incumbent on us in leadership positions. How do you get your work out at a school level to show these young learners that it's not just men who are leading and doing amazing things, but they are other people also doing it.
And like I've said, there's different structures, schools, there's community programs and all those things that we could go there. But I think what I want to add to this one is it is also important that we have leaders who are women being the ones going to talk to the kids. It's very different when you hear from a man how we have equal opportunities, you can do this as a woman. It's like if it was me talking, because I really can talk their language, I can relate with them. So I think for us as women leaders, we need to go out there, get out there and make sure that we talk to the young girls. We give them examples of what our experience has been, but most importantly to say you can do it like I did, because they'll be seeing a living example of success of being a woman and a leader at the same time.
Absolutely.
Well, Ms. Claudin, Jodie, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I'd like to thank you both for your time And on behalf of ASSAf, we really appreciate your views and all of your contributions to this.
And
So thank you.
Thanks
Thank
to
you.
you.
Opportunity.
Thanks to you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The break in communication, our executive officer, Professor Himla Sujal, had a bit of a problem connecting, such as the digital age. So sometimes the wind blows too hard and off you are. But on behalf of Professor Sujal, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. It's been a very interesting conversation. I must say, I actually learned myself quite a lot and I feel very inspired. And a great thanks to our three ladies, Dr. Claccali, Prof. Burton and Ms. Rols. I'm so grateful that you actually could be here. I think it makes a huge difference to have all three ladies in the room and to talk to each other as opposed to three digital faces trying to have a conversation. So really, thank you so much. And thank you so much for being our very first session. And it was a great conversation. I really thought that it was interactive. The comments came through, the questions came through. So thank you so much for our participants for opening yourselves up with these truly honest questions based on experiences, I would imagine. So thank you so very much. And I do hope that you'll consider participating in our next session. We're probably going to be looking at the next one in 3 months' time. And we're going to try and drum up an equal level of seniority, leadership, power, and womanness to have a discussion again. So thank you very much. And best of the day to you further and all the best. Thank you very much.